Hello, and thank you for joining us for this virtual program, Food for Thought, a toast to Blondell with Korsha Wilson. I'm Joshua Oduga, Public Programs and Exhibitions Manager at Art and Practice, and we are very excited to share this virtual program with you. This program is organized in association with Art and Practice's current exhibition, Blondell Cummings, Dance as Moving Pictures, a co-presentation with the Getty Research Institute. The exhibition is on view at Art and Practice in Leimert Park until February 2022. For this program, we welcome food writer and graduate of the Culinary Institute of America, Korsha Wilson. She is the host of A Hungry Society, a podcast that takes a more inclusive and diverse look at the food world. She has also written for the New York Times, Eater, Bon Appetit, Vogue, The New Yorker, and Food and Wine. Hello, Korsha.
Hi, Joshua. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Really excited to have you here. Personally, such a huge fan of your writing.
So thank you so much.
Have been looking forward to this for a really long time. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. You know, it's gray and gloomy here in New Jersey, but you know, it's nice to have fall colors outside on the trees.
Yeah, definitely. It's starting to feel a little bit like fall here in LA
Yeah.
as well. So to give everybody a little bit of context about this specific program, during Blondell's career, she created a series of dance works titled Food for Thought. These works included a suite of performances collected on a single tape that represented Cummings' kinetic meditation on the importance and specificity of food. In many of Cummings' other dance works, she often used meals and food as the basis for her dances and the themes that they explored. For Cummings, food was an entry point by which she explored not only her own life stories, but also the stories of others. For this little program series, Food for Thought, within our larger program series, we have invited 3 women who also use food as a way to share stories, cultures, and understanding, to share a story of their own with everyone who's participating in this program. So Korsha, do you want to give everybody a little bit of context about the story that you're going to tell, and then we can get right into it?
Yeah, so as you said, I do use food to tell not only my story, but stories that I think are important just in terms of cultural memory. This story in particular is very personally important to me. So I, in 2020, had the extreme fortune of getting to go to the Virgin Islands on assignment. So I got to spend a week between St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix. And my mom grew up in St. Thomas. So I'm very familiar with the islands. I've been going since I was little. And that story was about the French influence in the cuisine there and how it's just a mashup of French, Danish, African, and even like a Puerto Rican influence in the food there as well between the 3 islands. And it was amazing. And something I noticed was actually what I didn't see, which is this dish called fungi. And I grew up eating fungi. I feel like my grandmother would make me eat it because it's cornmeal and okra whisked together with a ton of butter. And it's like perfect underneath some like stewed fish. And now I've come to love it. But I was just really shocked that I didn't see it on a lot of menus there because it's so traditional and such a big part of Virgin Islands cuisine.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I wanted to write a story about that.
That sounds great. So we can get into the story now. You share some images as well. I'll share the images for everyone. So let me share my screen.
Yes, so these are 2 of my favorite pictures I took while I was there last, and I'm dying to get back. But the one on the left is in St. Thomas, and it's a statue called Fireburn. And Fireburn was an event on St. Croix that was actually a revolt against labor laws. And it was led by 3 women who were captured. But it just speaks to like the beauty and resilience that I I see in so much of African-American foodways and Caribbean foodways in particular, just making a way out of no way. And so I actually have this as like my phone backdrop to remind me of like the beauty and brilliance and bravery and resistance that's within Black women, period, Caribbean or otherwise. And then on the right, it's just a bit of like natural beauty in St. Croix. I actually happened to be there over the course of my birthday and walked to this beach. And it just like, it's such a beautiful, I wish I was sitting there right now. Like, so I just wanted to share that too. But the next picture is actually fungi, if you haven't seen it. And this is how you would make it. You'd make it in like a sauce pot and, you know, start the okra and then whisk in the cornmeal, keep whisking, add butter, keep whisking until it gets to the consistency that you want it. Some people like it super thick and dense. Some people like it with a ton of butter and runny. But it's just one of those things that's like one of those delicious starches underneath something that like soaks up all the juice.
Is it a thing that you eat at any time of day? Like, can you eat it like for like a lunch meal or a breakfast meal, or is it primarily like a dinner?
I've primarily had it at dinner or lunch. I guess back in the day, you could eat it in the morning, but it's pretty heavy. So you'd want it to be in the middle of your day or at the end of it. If it's in the morning, you won't be doing much after. You'll need a nap.
Totally. In Nigeria, we have fufu.
Yes.
Which is our, like, it's very similar, I think, in composition, at least. It has like different ingredients for sure, but it's just making me think of that.
Yes. And it's so funny you mentioned that because in St. Thomas, you'll often have fungi with callaloo on top. So like stewed greens and seafood, and it's like eforire. Like it's a direct tie between West Africa and the Caribbean. It's beautiful.
That's really interesting. I'll have to try to track it down here in a
minute. So this picture is St. Croix, view from one of the places I stayed, and it was taken the last day of the trip where I was just kind of reflecting on all the things I had gotten to taste and experience. And I had a lot of delicious food, but part of me was like, oh, I hope we don't lose fungi. Like that's such an important part of the culture. I didn't know it turned into a full story, but it was just on my mind. So I wanted to share this picture too. Yes, and so this dish, this is actually from a Puerto Rican restaurant in St. Croix. And if you look at this, you see a lot of Puerto Rican influence. And that's what's so cool to me about not just the Virgin Islands, but the Caribbean in general. I think it's one of the most interesting food regions on the planet because of how many different cultures have touched the Caribbean. And St. Croix, you see a huge Puerto Rican and Trinidadian influence. And so I really wanted to share this picture too, because I think people often think of Caribbean food as like one thing. And from island to island, you can touch so many different countries and have so many different influences. And so I wanted to share that too, to show that it's not just, you know, fried fish and some beans. That stuff's delicious too. Don't get me wrong. But but you know, it looks like so many different things.
Yeah, that must have been such an enlightening experience for you to be there.
Yes.
Especially because, like, as you mentioned, you were on like another assignment and you went there and you were thinking about this. In terms of formulating these kinds of stories, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about being a writer who's working within different cultures and thinking about different cultures in your work and thinking about your own culture. And when you do that, what does it mean to you? Like how are you gathering these stories and how are you thinking about translating them through written word and making it be something that other people can really connect with?
You know, it's this, I hope this doesn't sound self-centered. But I found that when I try to do something so that it connects with other people, that it's not as meaningful as if I just speak about why it matters to me. And so like the fungi story in particular, learning that cornmeal and salt pork was rationed to my ancestors by the Danish government so that they could keep working. And our ancestors grew okra out of plain sight, hidden, to feed themselves, to make something that they could survive on. That means a lot to me. And I think that when it means so much, it comes through in the writing. And I think, to tie it back to Blondell, when you look at Chicken Soup, that dance, it's so intimate and personal, but it's universal. I think there's always universality in like that intimateness, and like when you get to like the core meaning behind things of, feeling pride or feeling gratitude or love. Those are things that speak to everybody.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I've thought about that a lot as I've experienced Blondell's work, especially the work in the Food for Thought series itself, the work where she's thinking about different dishes and different ways that it affects people and their culture and things like that. I think what you're saying is really interesting. I think that the best writers probably approach it in the way that you do as well. It's not about creating a universal concept. It's really about thinking about those personal ideas in the way that personal things, as us all being humans, just can be really universal. I think that that's really interesting. And one of the things I think that leads me to, and is where you gather inspiration from. I know in one sense it may be food, it may be the stories that you're telling, but I'd love to think about that, especially because I think of writers as the people that oftentimes other people go to for inspiration. So I think a lot, I'm like, where do writers get that from? And I think after you answer, I'll also follow up and tie it to Blondell as well.
Yeah, I go to other writers too, but I try not to think about people doing that with me, because that's a lot of pressure and I don't want to like have that on my mind as I try to like create something. But usually for me, it's talking to someone. Part of the reason why I started a podcast period is because interviews are my favorite thing to do as far as writing. Like the interview process is just like my absolute favorite thing. And I wanted a reason to do that multiple times a week and just do that. But also going to museums is always super inspiring. Taking time in nature is inspiring. And then also things going wrong can be inspiring. So I actually am working on a piece about when meals, you have the best intentions for them and they don't come out right. And how we don't usually see the mistakes, the culinary mistakes, and how even your like favorite chefs make them at home in the professional kitchen. They happen and there's nothing wrong with them. So yeah, and that was inspired by me messing up a dinner. And I'm a good cook. I can say that I'm a good cook, but sometimes you just don't have the plan fully fleshed out and you have to like just go with it. And I find that's where inspiration can kind of creep in and say, you should talk about this because probably other people are dealing with it too.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And that really ties me to the thing I was gonna say that goes back to Blondell, is being able to take in all of these different ideas, being able to take in what's happening around you, and translate them through your own work. And I think Blondell was doing that through her dance and through her choreography, but I think she was also doing that with the ideas that she was coming across, whether it's food or the woman's menstrual cycle, or whether it's the relationship between women of different cultures. There's various different things that she was exploring in her work that were ways that it seems she was trying to figure things out as well. And with this story specifically, I think the story that you just shared with everyone about food, it really tasks people to think about their lineage in a specific way, right? Like you mentioned that you were on this trip thinking about your grandmother and thinking about the work that you were doing. And these things were the catalyst for a new idea, for a new type of writing, a new story, I should say. And so I wanted to ask you, kind of to wrap everything up really nicely, what's next for you in terms of writing, in terms of those things, and what ideas and what things are you really excited about?
Yeah.
You just shared one right now, the idea of mistakes, which is something that I think about all the time in the field that I work in. How to turn mistakes into something beautiful, right?
Yeah.
What concepts, what stories are you trying to figure out? What's the next phase for Korsha as a writer?
Oh, man. Well, I mean, I feel like it's interesting to think about, having, because I was thinking about this a lot in early 2020, kind of, what's next, what projects do I want to tackle? And then the world kind of went upside down. And so lately it's been, I will say for like 2020, it was just, okay, one foot in front of the other, getting projects done. Um, I was lucky enough to secure a co-authored cookbook deal
Amazing.
with Chef Eric Ajapong, and go to Ghana with him and taste food there and see the connections between Ghana and the Caribbean and America. And I'm still processing that. It's been a few weeks now, but it was just monumental in terms of, Michael Twitty says if you're a Black American and you visit Africa, you feel like you've got people, like on the other side of the planet, like,
Mm-hmm.
with you, rooting for you, and, you do the same for them. And it just gives you kind of the sense of having come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel that. And I'm, maybe want to write about that experience and going to slave castles on the coast of Ghana. But yeah, always kind of using food as a lens to not only talk about what matters to me, but kind of archive the things that are happening right now as well. I think that's a part of food writing that I don't think gets enough sort of attention, is that we're archiving the present moment.
Mm.
And that's such an important thing when you think about who gets to say what history is and what it includes and doesn't include.
Yes, that is such a beautiful thing. And I've thought about this so much, but working with Blondell's work, and specifically, I think her work that has to do with food, which is really interesting. It was one of the things where a colleague of mine, we thought about this program really early on, like really early on in the process in terms of food and all of that, because I think these experiences are things that each person is trying to figure out
Yes.
on their own. And you mentioned this idea of archiving, and I think that Blondell was a master at that. And I think in all creative people, and I consider you to be an artist as well.
Oh, goodness.
So in all creative
That's kind
people,
of you.
all people making things, I think this idea of archiving is something that's so important
Yeah.
nowadays. Thinking about that, and thinking about not only archiving your own work or your own stories, but other people's stories as well. And thinking about the way that in the future these things are consumed. So thank you so much for like doing the stuff that you do to do that, and making it be so personal in a way, I think, because it's really important. Is there anything else that you want to add before we
Yeah.
close this down?
I mean, it's interesting how in archiving what other people are doing, you kind of show up yourself as a person, and you're
Yes.
like listening to um, my old podcast episodes where I'm like kind of figuring out how to interview folks. It's like I'm also talking about things that mattered to me at the time. And so it's like
Mhm.
this time capsule, which is also, I was going to say, what you're doing, with your interview series. It's you're archiving not only your subjects you're talking to, but yourself as well, and your point in history. So
Yeah, definitely. I think
multifaceted.
it's so important to make these spaces for ourselves and for each other, right? And so in this series, I think food for thought specifically, I think it's so exciting to think about a platform for other people to share stories, and where they are at this moment. So congratulations on the travels and the cookbook and everything. And we'll all be waiting for more, for sure.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a dope program. And I'm so grateful that you asked me to do it.
Yeah, thanks. And we will link below to Korsha's story in the New York Times so that everybody can read it at their discretion. And we'll also share some links to other things that we've talked about in this program. Thank you all for joining us, and have a good evening or day or whenever you happen to watch this.
Bye.